It's time to work on the last block in section 1 of our Pumpkins and Potions quilt. We have one block left for section 1. That is a filler block. However, I have decided to do all 5 filler blocks for the entire quilt. That way I can get them done and they will be ready when we need them. I have the background fabric that have all been backed with interfacing, and I have the batting. That's all we need for these filler blocks. Let's get started. There are 5 filler blocks in the quilt, and although I only need one for section 1, I will be stitching these out all at the same time. I will use 2 hoopings to complete all 5. The first set of filler blocks that I will put into one hooping are filler blocks 1, 2, and 4. The reason I'm putting these together is because they all use the same color of thread for the background quilting. To bring files in, you can go to the Merge Stitch file. You would select this and then find the file and bring it into the hoop. However, when bringing in more than one file, you would have to come back to this Merge Stitch file and find that file each time. An easier way is to open the folder where you keep the files. You can drag and drop as many files as you need without having to go back and find and open the folder. The first file I will bring in for filler block 1, I will go to the quilting bundle, and it uses Halloween 11, and I need the 4x6 horizontal. I will drag and drop it into the hoop. Filler block 4 also uses the same background, and I need the 2x4 horizontal. And I will drag and drop that into the hoop. Now filler block 2 uses Halloween 10, and I need the 2x6. I need to rotate these designs so that they will fit into the hoop. I can go to the right hand side, select the first, hold my shift key down and select the last. That will select all 3. I can drag a selection box over all of them, or on my Mac I can Command A and that will select everything on my screen. Now I will come to the rotate right so that they will fit into the hoop. Now I need to select and move these and space them out. I will select the first design and move it to the top. I will select the second and move it down, and then finally the third and move it all the way down. I do need to leave some space between each of these so that the fabric, when it overlaps, will not get caught in the stitching of another block. I could save this file as is, and when it goes to the machine it would stitch out one block completely at a time. If I go to the Stitch Simulator and run that, it would run the first start to finish, the same with the second, and then the third. But since I'm in software, I want to color sort so all of the same steps for each 3 of the blocks will run at the same time. I am going to make a few changes before I color sort. I kept my batting to size, and so I do not need a few of the steps with the background quilting. The first step of the background quilting is always the placement line for the batting. I do need that. The second step is the tack down of the batting, but because my batting is cut to size, this step is not needed. The third step is the placement for the fabric, and it is just 1/4 of an inch outside of the batting line. Our fabric is cut much larger, and so this is a step that can be skipped, but I'm going to go ahead and delete it since I'm in software. And then the 4th step is the tack down of the fabric, which I do need. So I will select step 2, hold my shift key down and select step 3, and I will hit delete on my keyboard. I will do that for each of the background quilting. So now each of the background quilting has the placement for the batting, the tack down of the fabric, and then the quilting. Those are all the changes I need to make to this design because my thread for each of the background quiltings will be the same. I can leave everything as they are. I will come up to Utility and Color Sort, and it's been changed by 6 colors or 6 steps. I will always select a new view after I color sort to make sure that my new design is what I need. You can see now that there is just one design with the 3 steps. The first step will do the placement line for the batting for all 3 blocks. The second will do the tack down of the fabric for all 3 blocks. And then finally the quilting for all 3 blocks. And that's exactly what I want. Now I will save my file, so I will come to File, Save Stitch File As, and I will name the blocks. I will put them into my Combined Files folder, and then I will add that to my USB to take to my machine. For the second hooping, I will come up to the top left toolbar and add a new page. For filler block number 3, that uses the Halloween 10, which I'm already in that folder, and I need the 4x6. I will drag and drop it into the hoop. For filler block number 5, that also uses the Halloween 10 and also uses a 4x6. So I will drag and drop that again. I have 2 files and they are both centered, so right now it looks like there's just one design, but I do need to select both of these. I will Command A on my Mac, and I will come to the rotate right and rotate them. I will select the first file and I will move it up, then select the second and move it down and leave enough space for the overlapping fabric. Now I need to make the same changes to these designs. I will take out steps 2 and 3 of both designs. There's one other change I need to make to this file. These will have different thread colors, and so if I were to color sort, that would group both of the background quilting designs, and so I need to make a change to one of these colors. Now I could leave them the same colors and just after my machine stitches out the first block, I could stop my machine and change the thread color. But if I change the color in the software, then my machine will automatically stop. So on the second block, I will select the background quilting and I will select the color swatch. I'm going to choose the bottom color that pops up, which is Sprout, and select OK. Now the 2 background quiltings have different colors and the machine will automatically stop between. Now I will go to Utility and Color Sort, and I will select a new view, and this is now one design with 4 steps. The first step for both blocks will be the placement for the batting. The second will be the tack down of the fabric, and then it will run each of the background quiltings on a separate step so that I can change colors. I will now come to File, Save Stitch File As, and name my block. I will put it in my Combined Files folder, and I will add it to my USB to take to my machine. For the filler blocks, I will go to Embroidery and to the USB, and then to the Combined Files folder. I will choose Filler Blocks 1, select Set and Embroidery. Now when I made these in my Embrilliance Essential software, I mentioned that I put these 3 particular ones together because I was going to use the same color thread for the quilting. I've decided that for my 2 solid fabrics, I am going to use the lighter orange thread. And I didn't go back to software and make any changes. So what I will do is I will stitch the quilting on this. And when it finishes with that first block, I will hit stop on my machine. And then I will change my thread and continue the quilting for the last 2. Let's get started. Now I will change to the light orange, which in my case is the Mango Smoothie, and finish the last 2 blocks. I changed to the Mango Smoothie thread because I wanted the quilting to stand out a little bit more on these solid colored orange blocks. Here is the darker orange, the Marmalade thread, and you can see that it's really close to the exact same color. And so with this Mango Smoothie, you can see the quilting much better. I will go to Home, and I will cancel, go to Embroidery, back to my USB and my Combined Files folder, and I will get the filler blocks too. Select Set and Embroidery. I am going to move them to the top and to the left. You can see in the back I have the filler blocks I just stitched off the top of the hoop, and again I have my roll of stabilizer still connected. So let's finish these last 2. I used Mango Smoothie. That was the last thread that I used for the filler blocks. I'm just going to keep that in to do the placement line for the batting. To show you that with all of these filler blocks, they do have the quilting that goes into the seam allowance. So if I turn this over, you can see that this right hand stitch line is the fabric tack down, and we would normally take that out and then cut the stabilizer right next to this inside line, which is the batting line. And you can see that there is a line of stitching that goes in between the batting and the tack down, and that is just part of the quilting design. On the last block that I did, I just cut my block to size and I didn't take out this basting stitch. This time for all the filler blocks, I am going to remove this basting stitch, and I am going to cut the stabilizer right next to the stitching that's in the middle. Of course, I won't be able to go to the batting. There still will be a little bit of stabilizer, but I am going to go ahead and do that for all of the filler blocks. So here is just the fabric, and that's backed with the interfacing. I've taken out that basting stitch. So here is the stitch that is in the seam allowance. So I just cut my stabilizer as close as I could. Now I will press them and then cut them to size. I have used a little bit of best press, and I've noticed that with the no-show mesh, my iron sticks to it a little bit, and I'm not sure if I just need to turn down my heat of my iron, but I have been, when I press the back, I have been pressing with a pressing cloth. On the blocks that have the stitching that goes into the seam allowance, I do like cutting them from the front so that I can use that stitching that is in the seam allowance as my guide and just make sure that there's equal distance apart. So you can see between this side stitching and this side I have equal amounts, and the same with the bottom up to the top. I have that inside stitching about the same all around. For these last two blocks, there really isn't a ruler that is exactly like this, that is the size that we need. This small piece will be cut to 2.5 by 4.5. The longer one will be cut at 2.5 by 6.5. They do have this little solid one that's exactly the size we need for the small, but because it's the same color fabric, it's really hard to tell the best way to line it up because it's just so close to the color. I probably could do it, but it's kind of hard to see the stitching and to make sure that I get things even. So I would probably use this if this was any other color, but I'm going to set that aside and show you what I would do with a larger ruler. So these blocks both need to be cut at 2.5 inches wide, and on the ruler there are the little tiny 1/8 of an inch markings, and if I line that first 1/8 of an inch up with the stitching line that has gone into the seam, then you can see on this side how this 1/8 of an inch is lined up, and then it's the 1/2 an inch. So in order to cut this block, I would line up the 1/8 of an inch along this seam. I would make sure that down here it also is lined up. These little marks are not only 1/8 of an inch apart, but they're also 1/8 of an inch long. So I would just want to measure and make sure that the bottom of this little 1/8 of an inch mark is touching the seam line. So that's how I'm going to line up for my first cut. I will flip it around and do the same thing. Let me get this first one done. I could cut all the way through, but I wanted to make sure that I cut straight. So after I get that cut, I will just move my ruler up and align it to this cut line that I've already done to make sure to get a nice straight cut line. So that is the first side. Now I will take it, and what I will do is, now that I have this cut, I will line that up with the 2.5 inch mark. So this is lined up at 2.5 inches, and make sure that it's straight. And then I will know that this is exactly 2.5 inches, which is the width that I need. Now I will do the same thing with this one. Now these are both cut to the correct width, but we need to cut them the lengthwise. So this might get a little confusing, but the easiest way that I am going to do this is with my 4.5 by 6.5 ruler. If you don't have the orange pop rulers, you can just do the same thing. Measure one and then cut to 6.5. And I hope this doesn't get too confusing. So this longer one needs to be 6.5 inches. Well, this ruler from this side to this side is 6.5 inches. So I am going to center, I'm going to put this cut line right up against this so I know that that is straight. And then I want to line up this stitching so that it is as straight as I can get it with the same amount. So now I have the cut edge lined up with that. I'm not going to use these two sides. And I have the stitching even, about as even as I can get it, this width. So now I will come and cut. You have to be careful not to move it. So now this is 2.5 by 6.5. I will do the same thing with this one. This needs to be 4.5, but I will use the 4.5 width. So I hope that makes sense. I will line the cut edge right up. And I will line up these stitching lines to be as close as I can get to the end of the ruler, just like I do when I use the whole ruler to cut a block out. It just happens that we're only cutting the ends. So now those two are cut. And I have the rest of my blocks. These are the filler blocks. And remember, we're only going to be using one of these for section 1 that we're going to sew together, but I have all of the filler blocks for the quilt.